Remember science? Remember cool science, the can-do American spirit of conquering frontiers and space and medicine alike? Our fourth story tonight, as of today, science is back. On August 9th, 2001, rather than doing something about the CIA's al-Qaeda warning 3 days earlier, Mr. Bush gave his first primetime televised speech in order to ban federal funding for research using new human embryonic stem cells, later using his first veto to block Congress from expanding that research. At a White House ceremony today, President Barack Obama announced new guidelines to protect the pursuit of science from the pursuit of politics, including a new executive order reversing Bush's stem cell funding ban.
Promoting science isn't just about providing resources, it's also about protecting free and open inquiry. It's about letting scientists like those who are here today do their jobs, free from manipulation or coercion, and listening to what they tell us, even when it's inconvenient, especially when it's inconvenient.
House Minority Leader John Boehner opposes the decision, while Nancy Reagan, who watched her husband, the late president, drift slowly and irreparably into Alzheimer's, applauded the decision. Stem cells being seen as valuable tools for research because they're capable of developing into any other kind of human cell, offering hope for everything, from repairing spinal cord damage like that suffered by Christopher Reeve, to treatment for Alzheimer's or Parkinson's or cancer, even burn victims, blindness, or other forms of organ failure. With us now, Florida Representative Debbie Wasserman Schultz, a veteran of the bioethics war ever since the battle over Terry Schiavo. Congresswoman, much thanks for your time tonight.
Oh, thanks for having me again, Keith. I appreciate it.
Today's reversal of this Bush policy, it certainly felt monumental and was obviously expressed that way to the research advocates in that room with President Obama. Can you elaborate on why it was so monumental?
Well, I mean, just think about the millions of people who have family members who are suffering with Parkinson's, Alzheimer's, juvenile diabetes, kidney disease. I mean, there are so many potential avenues for disease research that we can utilize now with the opportunity to do the research, the stem cell research that the president's authorization will allow now. What President Bush did a number of years ago was inserted his own views and the views of people who are in the minority of opinion in America into the personal lives of millions of Americans, and that is not what our American government should be all about. We should make sure that we foster science and make sure that we use the government to help improve people's lives.
Why did the president leave it as an authorization? Why did he leave it for Congress to decide whether federally funded researchers can create their own stem cell lines? And given that he's left Congress to do this, what do you think Congress is going to do?
Well, I think we're going to certainly look at whether we pass a statute that authorizes the stem cell research, but immediacy was important here. I mean, we need to make sure that we can get the funding into this research as quickly as possible, because the sooner that we get that funding available, the more likely it is that we have a scientific breakthrough that can help millions of people. So, you know, Congress has a tremendously large legislative plate right now, and the odds of getting to that legislation quickly, as quick as President Obama lifting the order, the executive order, were small.
The president today used this opportunity to talk about his faith. He called human cloning wrong. He said he would have strict guidelines for the stem cell research. He said federal funds would not be used to create new lines of stem cells, just to fund the research on them. If this president views these clumps of 50 to 100 cells as sort of precious too, based on some religious or other non-scientific sentiment, just as Mr. Bush did, even if the outcomes are different, what's the actual difference in the thought process between the two presidents?
The difference in the thought process is President Obama specifically focused on the embryos that have been created and donated to research. I mean, there are many, many women who go through IVF, in vitro fertilization now, who don't use all the embryos that are generated, and they donate those rather than simply discard them to the potential for research. And those are the available embryos that will be utilized now, when otherwise they would have simply been discarded. These are not embryos that are going to be used to generate life. They're embryos that will be used to make sure that we can save the lives, potentially, of millions of people worldwide.
You mentioned where mainstream America is on this. It supports this now. There's no question about that from all polling and all voting. What then is the political goal for John Boehner and other Republican leaders to make a mess out about this, to make a stink about this?
Well, it's just they're so incredibly selfish. I mean, you mentioned the Terry Schiavo debate a couple minutes ago, Keith. I mean, whether it was the Terry Schiavo debate or involving themselves in a woman's right to make her own reproductive choices or stem cell research, people on the extreme right-wing fringe of the Republican Party, they want to inject their own personal values, their own personal views on the policymaking in America. And on November 4th of last year, the American people said, we want a do-over. We want to push the reset button on so many of these extreme policies that President Bush handed down, and we want them undone. We want to make sure that we can explore the boundaries of scientific research. We want to make sure that we can, really make it possible to become energy independent and end offshore oil drilling. We want to make sure that we can make our own reproductive choices. Those are all executive orders that President Bush handed down, some at the last seconds of his administration, that the American people are going to breathe a sigh of relief now that President Obama is in the White House, because they get their do-over.
In retrospect, looking at the Republicans and the Schiavo disaster, it was like watching Cro-Magnon man panic over the sight of an eclipse. Thank goodness this has been undone. Democratic Congresswoman Debbie Wasserman Schultz of Florida, great thanks for joining us tonight.
Thanks for having me, Keith.